Hi, this is Derek Tsai from LearnByBlogging.com. Today, I will be giving a book review. This book called Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. Yuval Noah Harari. Brief History of Mankind, Sapiens. Very, very thick book. Tremendous, very deep book. By the way, you can see these that text over here. A very deep book, and so much insight about how the Homo sapien came to dominate the world since 70,000 years ago. Even if you don't believe in evolution, this book will give you an insight as how the agricultural and industrial revolution changed the course of human history. Would not like how he refers to religion as myth. The key takeaway is that Homo sapien came to dominate the world, the earth, through an unfair advantage, which is the cognitive brain and our mutual belief in myth. And though we are pretty insignificant in the beginning, insignificant as an animal or one of the creatures, and many truths that we currently believe are actually myth. Religion, human rights, Declaration of Independence, monies, and others, and which the author declared as myth. You may or may not believe in that, but if you read a book, you'll understand where it's arguing from. The arts serve to create stories, and the better story it is, like the money and Christianity, and the more successful they are. And past conflicts and wars can be attributed to not being able to reconcile our stories. We cannot make our story straight. Sort of like, we don't believe in the same myth. Instead of food or others, we don't really fight for food. We actually fight for reconciling the myth. And there's a pessimistic end to the Homo sapien, as you read toward the end of the chapter and end of the book. And the book may not appeal to the religious or non-believers in evolution. If you don't believe in evolution or you believe in religion, this may not be the good book for you. But to me, it is more of a prophecy based on our Homo sapiens history. So so that's kind of my takeaway. A summary of chapter by chapter summary. Part 1, there are actually 3 parts, 4 parts. The first part has to do with the cognitive revolution. That's how human becomes human and become as intelligent as we did. And then the part 2 is agricultural revolution, and that's how we went from a hunter and gatherer to more of a farmer. And then the part 3 has to do with the unification of human. This part here is how we come together and be able to grow, become as big as we are, or as numerous as we are. And then the part 4 has to do with the scientific revolution, and that is kind of where we are right now, the scientific revolution. And that's kind of the end of the chapter as it goes. So let me go chapter by chapter. If you want to read a book, go and read a book, but it's going to give you a chapter by chapter summary. Chapter 1, an animal of no significance. So the Big Bang happened around 13.5 billion years ago. About 6 million ago, our grandmother was born to one ape. There were a few other Homo sapiens, Homo species like Homo rudolfinensis, erectus, Homo erectus, silensis, floresiensis, they are dwarf, and Neanderthalensis. They were coexisting at the same time. Unlike some of the myth that people think, we happen from gradually. There's actually they all species are all around at the same time. And Homo sapiens starting to form a culture around 70,000 years ago, and the agricultural revolution happened around 12,000 years ago, and the scientific revolution happened about 500 years ago. So the part 1, part 2, part 3, and then part 4. And our jumbled brain really consume 25% of our body energy, while only occupying 2 to 3% of our total weight. So that goes to tell you where our evolution happening. Chapter 2 has to do with the tree of knowledge, how Homo sapien can cooperate in a group larger than 150 people, 150 members, can be attributed to our ability to believe in myth that exists in our collective imagination. In author's words, religion, the nationalism, law and justice, and human rights, cooperation, like for example the Peugeot brand, and monies are all myths. We have since lived in the duality of reality, like rivers and trees. The reality is the rivers and trees and lions, and then the myth has increasingly been powerful. So from myth, there arise our ability to trade, trust in money, and cooperate, tribal spirits, and pass on to the next generation, which is culture. So that takes us to the chapter 3, a day in the life of Adam and Eve. For nearly the entire history of our species, sapiens live as foragers, hunters and gatherers. Our brains, our minds, our eating habits are all adapted to the life of the hunting and gathering. And dogs were domesticated about 15,000 years ago. And sapiens did mostly gathering, including how to hunt and make and fix weapons, than really hunting. So evidence showed that the sapiens' brain shrunk since then. We don't use that much of a brain anymore. Despite the popular belief. By the author's account, there is a better life not working. This is a better life, not working as long hours than the agricultural era that followed. So they had. They also had a very diverse, wholesome food sources. All roles, not all the roles, not all. They are not all roses. Because old and sick people get left behind or killed off, and the infant mortality was very high, whether it's intentional or unintentional. So that brings us the chapter 4, the flood. The colonization of the Australia, which isolated from all the other continents, happened around 45,000 years ago, mostly by most likely by the sapiens in Indonesia, who were capable of sailing long distance. Why the Australia is important, because that's very isolated and has preserve a lot of the original culture in a way. And then the settler of the Australia transformed the Australian ecosystems beyond recognition. As a result of Homo sapiens' arrival, most of the giant marsupial animals, like mammals like wombat, giant kangaroos, etc., were gone within a few thousand years ago, a few thousand years of a sapiens' arrival. And same thing happened, can be said about sapiens' arrival in America. So sapiens seems to be the culprit in the extinction of many large-sized animals. And in a way, we are the deadliest animals on the earth. So that wrapped up the part 1 and the cognitive revolution. Part 2 is the cultural revolution. The history's biggest flaw is that we are being convinced to grow culture. About 10,000 years ago, grow agriculture, that is. Say about 10,000 years ago, sapien began to manipulate the lives of many animals, a few animals, and plant species, and more than 90% of the calories that feed humanity actually come from a handful of plants, and our ancestors actually domesticated between 9500 BC and 3500 BC. They are wheat, rice, corn, potatoes, millet, and barley. By the 1st century AD, the vast majority of people actually throughout most of the world were agriculturists or farmers. And the agricultural revolution was history's biggest fraud, according to the author, as farmers live generally more difficult and less satisfying than those of the foragers that it has ability, but it has ability to keep more people alive under the worst case condition. So whose fault is that? There are a handful of plant species that were domesticated. They have actually been domesticated Homo sapiens rather than the other way around. And there's a discrepancy between evolution success and individual suffering. So that's not all roses. Chapter 6, Building Pyramid. The agricultural revolution made the future more important than ever been before. The farmers always want to keep the future in mind and work in the service rather than work from day to day. They're busy plowing the fields while very few people have been making history. The French Revolution was started by some affluent lawyers, and the social norms that sustained the empires were based on belief in a shared myth. And for example, the American Declaration of Independence and Hammurabi's code about equality, the liberty, and human rights. These myths and imagined order were always in danger of collapse. So they vanish once people stop believing in them. Three factors, of course, they don't vanish. The three factors that keep people believe in the imagined order, or A, is that imagined order is embedded in the material world. B, the imagined order shapes our desire, and C, the imagined order is intersubjective, something that exists within the communication network, linking the subjective consciousness of many individuals. So to change the existing imagined order, we must first believe in an alternative imagined order, and that's very hard to do. Chapter 7, Memory Overload. Writing was invented as a record keeping between 3500 and 3000 BC due to our mental limitation and the amount of people and the property that exceeded the threshold. Back in those days, they're used as they're keeping those books as a taxation or some sort. Chapter 8, there's no justice in history. So we lack the biological instincts to sustain human society, but we managed to do so with the imagined order and devised script. So Hindus came up with the myth that some cosmic forces make one caste superior than the other. But these hierarchies are all product of human imagination. But they enable complete strangers to know how to treat one another. So throughout history, concepts of pollution and purity have played a very leading role in enforcing social and political divisions that have been exploited by the numerous ruling classes to maintain their privileges. So in America, the purity was upheld by racial segregation, and women were treated as property of men, and that's how we managed to live so long with that kind of framework. Chapter 3 has to do with the part 3 is about the unification of human. That's how we all come together, and how we grow and so huge in number. So the era of history is how we all come together. Since French Revolution, people came to believe in both equality and individual freedom as fundamental value. But these two actually conflict with each other. I didn't realize that when I come to think of it, it's true. There's a thing called cognitive dissonance, that the two conflicting idea. Small but simple culture gradually coalesce coalesce into a bigger and more complex civilizations. So history is moving endlessly toward unity. For example, the ethnic cuisine, the ethnic cuisine, they're kind of almost the same nowadays. Everyone was us, and there was no longer them. We all come together as one unified human, because we share the same myth in a way, same idea about human rights and etc. Chapter 10, the scent of money. So author joke, Osama bin Laden really hates everything about American, except for the American dollars. And when he was caught, he has a lot of American dollars around. Money is needed because it's to social specialization and trading with strangers, and to avoid bartering and storing and to store wealth. Cigarette can be used in the place of money in prisons and POW camps. And more than 90% of our money, $60 trillion in today's value, are in our accounts, and less than 10% in physical money. And money is exchanged because people trust the figments of a collective imagination, and is the most universal, efficient system of mutual trust ever devised. And gold and silver turn into a single transnational and transcultural monetary systems, despite being traded by people of different religion, languages, and economic, social convertibility, social and political spheres. And money is based on two universal principles. A is that universal convertibility, you can convert from one to the other. Universal trust. And the dark side of money is that the world is in danger of becoming one big and rather heartless marketplace. If you got money, talks, and there's nothing else matters. So that's chapter 10. Chapter 11, the Imperial vision. Historically, he's talking about in the history, there are a lot of empires. Historically, empires are defined as political order with a rule over a significant number of distinctive people. And number two is the flexible borders and unlimited appetite. And there were several empires, including Rome, the China's Qing dynasty, the Aztec, the British Empire. They reduced the empire reduced the human diversity. It forged out of them new and much larger groups. Empire contribute to philosophy. That's a good thing. Philosophy, art, justice, charity, common languages, law enforcement, urban planning, standardization of weights and measures, taxes, etc. India, in a way, has benefited tremendously from British rules for almost 100 years. I don't know if Indian people agree, but as of today, states are losing their independence and open to the global market and the interferences of global companies and general public opinions and international judicial systems. So the global empire is being forged before our eyes, and the empire could be a big corporation these days. Now, chapter 12, the law of religion. Religion has been the third great unifier of humankind, along with empire and money. So these are three major unifier is religion, empire, and money. Religion is a system of human norms and value that founded and the belief that in a superhuman order, not the product of human whims and agreement. So some history of religion like polytheism, dualism, and Buddhism they are introduced here. A simple law of Buddhism, suffering arises. And this is one example about Buddhism is that suffering arises from the craving, and the only way to be fully liberated from suffering is to be fully liberated from cravings, and train your mind to experience reality as is. Great teaching about Buddhism. I might look into that in the future. The secret of success. The people who know the period best, those lived at the time, were the most clueless of them all. if you live in the current era, you don't know what's going on. And if you live in that era, you probably don't know what's going on. Christianity became the official Roman state religion. That was and still was a puzzle why it became a religion of Rome, official religion. And the history cannot be explained really deterministically and cannot be predicted because it's such a chaotic situation. So many forces are at work and the interaction are so complex. So that wraps up the part 3 about how humans are unified, Homo sapiens. The last part is about the scientific revolution which happened in the last 500 years. Chapter 14 is about the discovering of ignorances. For the last 500 years, the human population have increased 14 times, 14-fold. Our GDP has increased, gross national product has increased 240-fold, and the energy consumption 115-fold. The historical process that led to the first atom bomb test in Alamogordo, New Mexico, is called the scientific revolution by the author. And the modern science differs from all the previous knowledge in 3 areas. Number 1, the willingness to admit ignorance, ignoramus is one. And number 2 is the centrality of observation and mathematics. And number 3 is acquisition of new power. Prior to that, if you ask someone wiser, they will tell you that it's not important to know. Just leave it to God. They will tell you everything. Life insurance was first applied to clergymen through the use of mathematics back in 1765. Until the scientific revolution, most human culture did not believe in progress, and so now is the progress and power equals to ignorance and scientific discovery. And thanks to our own admission of ignorance, we became a good explorer. Chapter 15, the marriage of science and empire. The West dominated the past 100 years, as distributed by the author, because the Chinese and Persian lacked the value, the myth, the judicial apparatus, and social political structure in the West. And the European imperialists set out to distant shores in the hope of obtaining new knowledges along with the new territories. So discovery of America was the foundational event of a scientific revolution, because all of a sudden they realized there's a whole world there they have not discovered yet, and that reinforced the belief that they didn't know anything, or they were ignorant. So this united their unparalleled and insatiable ambition to explore and conquer. So the Spaniards were led by Cortes and Pizarro. They exercised genocide in South America, including demolishing the entire Aztec Empire. And it was amazing how just a few hundred people, Spanish, can conquer entire Aztec Empire and Inca Empire as well. So chapter 16, the capitalist creed. The capitalism fueled the scientific revolution. What enabled banks and the entire economy to survive and flourish is our trust in the future. So that's a key ingredient. The sole backing for most of the money in the world is the credit. The host of new wonderful opportunity open up when we can build things in the present using the future income. In other words, leveraging credit. So Adam Smith taught people to think win-win. Greed is good, and by becoming richer, I benefit everybody. So egoism is altruism, and capitals consist of money, goods, and resources that are invested in production. So the European conquest of the world was financed through credit rather than through taxes, and directed by the capitalists whose main ambition was to receive the maximum returns on their investment. And Dutch, rather than Spain, was very successful because they win the trust of their judicial system and the trust of the financial system by repaying their loan on time and in full. And the judicial system enjoy independence and protected private property rights. And because of that, they're very successful. And capital and politics play a huge role in the Britain-China's Opium War and the Greece independence from Turkey or Ottoman. The Egypt's paying off the Suez Canal debts was forced to pay off the debt by the British Empire. Numbers chapter 17, the wheels. Now we talk about what's driving the industry. The wheel that drives the scientific revolution early was the steam engine, and it improved the textile industry. The capitalists, the consumers deal is the people are promised a paradise, but only the rich remain greedy and spend their money, their time making more money, and the masses give free rein to their cravings and passions and buy more and more. So this kind of the consumerism is what driving the scientific revolution. Chapter 18, so that's kind of going downhill, as you can see. A permanent revolution. The humankind is driving many species to extinction, might even annihilate itself. Almost everything we do now must be done on time. The biggest social evolution is collapse of the family and the local community and replacement by the state and the market. So over time, by liberating the individuals, the states and markets use their growing power to weaken the traditional bonds of family and community. So today, humankind has broken the law of the jungle, but at least there are peace now. There's real peace now because the much higher price of war and the profit decline, as the wealth consists of mostly human capital these days and not physical capital, not physical property. So there's no reason to fight and to start a war because you're not going to get much of anything. So chapter 19, there's 2 more chapters to go. This is a very long book, by the way. It took me a long time to summarize it. And then live chapter 19 and then live happily ever after. So this chapter addresses whether we are actually happier now with the improved material condition and before the collapse of family and community. So being satisfied with what you already have is more important than getting more of what you want. It's just a matter of expectations. Also, our happiness is determined by the complex system of nerves, neurons, synapses, and various biochemical substances such as serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin. So this is a departure from history in a way, but this is kind of the historian view of where we are. Another way to look at it, a meaningful life can be extremely satisfying even in the midst of hardship. And whereas a meaningless life is a terrible ordeal no matter how comfortable it is. So if someone said it's a self-delusion, it's probably true. The Buddhism is a cure for the self-delusion by paying no attention to the inner and the external condition and achievement. And this happiness history is a gap historians have not filled. So nobody knows if our ancestors are any happier than we are now, and whether that is something that should be kept track of. But this is a little bit departure from a history book, by the way. Chapter 20 is the last of the chapter, and this the end of Homo sapiens. So what does it mean by the end? So until recently, sapiens are incapable of breaking free our biological determined limit. Though we have circumvented through selective breeding of animals, we are now beginning to break the law of natural selection. We are replacing them with the laws of intelligent design. By playing with the DNA, the stem cells, the scientists are actually playing gods through 3 methods. The biological engineering, cyborg engineering, and number 3 is engineering of inorganic life from robots or some sort. There are lots of ethical and social and political questions that remain. The upper wealthy class may be able to create their own further inequality through medical and biological engineering. So their new singularity with all the concepts that we have given meaning to our world becomes irrelevant. So they bring back the idea of the Frankenstein myth that confronts the Homo sapien. The last days are fast approaching and become the truth soon. What do we want to become? You can actually ask that question that we'll be asking. And so we pretty soon will no longer be the generic or the so-called Homo sapien. We might be super Homo sapiens, or as the rich people might become even more super or Superman, whatever. So there are a lot of videos that you can find on, if you click on the YouTube, my blog, you'll see a lot of the video that Dr. Harari has presented at TED and other places, and I think he's still teaching a class about this Homo sapien book. So overall, it's pretty decent book, very interesting. Kind of make you think about where we are and where how human play has come from and where we are going. So keep you thinking, and interesting book. Definitely recommend it. And it's a bit long, but it's well worth the read. And that's all I have. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye now.